Hi, Jewish moms. I think most of you remember that a few weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I spent almost a week at Blue Lake, which is my husband's family's cottage, in sort of the Canadian wilderness. And so actually, if you look behind me, I sort of would have positioned the camera so you can see behind me. You can see sort of a picture that we keep on our wall of Blue Lake. And I don't think I told you anything about Blue Lake, but Blue Lake is really, it's sort of like paradise on earth, really. It's on a lake called Blue Lake, and my husband's family, they're like the only people pretty much on this lake. They have an entire, I'm saying in other words, they have an entire lake to themselves. And they have they have like a couple, like two loons that live on the lake, and they have like a beaver, and it's just this idyllic. Then when I went canoeing with my husband, we saw like a heron, and my husband and I would just like spend like an hour watching the clouds going by, and the perfect blue sky, and it really is for us. It really feels like paradise, and. So one morning that I was there, I went on a walk. And I went walking in the woods. And I was just looking at all the trees around. And it was like this beautiful, thick forest. And I looked up at the blue sky and the sort of crisp Canadian summer air. And it was just so beautiful. And just like these very, very dense sort of cotton ball clouds going slowly through the sky. And I just felt like, and tears came to my eyes, and I just felt like, wow, Hashem, you made this. I can't believe this place. I can't believe what you did. Like, I can't believe the majesty of Hashem. And I was overwhelmed by this feeling like, why leave here? Hashem, I feel you here. I feel together with you here. I see that you created this tremendous place. And also what I thought, how many people in the history of the world have ever seen this incredibly remote location? And yet Hashem, in his all powerfulness, invested in making it such a gorgeous place. And it just felt like the kindness of Hashem and the majesty of Hashem and the omnipotence of Hashem. And it was just an amazing feeling. So I was thinking to myself, why leave here? Why don't we bring our kids here? And I can say Tehillim, and I can daven here, and we can have Shabbat here, and we can homeschool our kids here. Why leave here? I could be such a spiritual Jewish person. And my husband also loves Blue Lake. We could just stay there forever, It'd be so much easier than living in the world. It'd be so much easier than coming back to Israel and dealing with the war and dealing with the sirens and hearing all the terrible news about these poor soldiers, these poor young soldiers with so much potential. You see their beautiful faces, and they're never going to be getting married. They're never going to be having children. They're dead. They're 19, 20 years old, and they're dead. They were killed in this war by our enemies who, you just feel, when I was there, I just felt like, why go back? And even beyond the idea living in Israel, no matter where we would choose to live, let's say that we wouldn't live in Israel, and we love Israel, we're not moving anywhere else, but let's say we didn't live in Israel, living in Jewish communities is tough. There's wonderful aspects, and there's so much chesed, and there's so much wonderful stuff, and there's a lot of people who are working on spiritually growing, and there's also stuff which isn't so easy, dealing with difficult people and dealing with difficult situations and dealing with problems in our community. So I came back to the cottage, and I will give you a direct quote, an exact quote. I said to my husband, humanity sucks. Why go back? Why go back to the war and to, the problems of society and the problems of our community and the problems of everything? Why not just stay here? Okay. So, so I said, and so like whatever. I wasn't so serious. I just like playing with I was sort of playing with this idea. But something that came to my mind was I remembered something many years ago. I spoke with my Rabbi David Sperling, and I think it was over a decade ago. I think it was maybe during an intifada, or we had to there was like a threat from Saddam Hussein of chemical warfare. There was something scary happening in Israel at the time. And I called Rabbi Sperling and asked him, why are we living in Israel? I don't really get it. Why don't we go live somewhere where it's safer? Why live in this dangerous place? What justification do we have? And I think that Rabbi Sperling said a bunch of things. Probably he said something about the mitzvah of living, of settling the land of Israel. But what I remember is I remember him saying, that he said there are places in the world where you can live that are big Jewish communities. Let's say you could live in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and even the street names, he said, are maybe in Hebrew, and the store names are in Hebrew. It's like a Jewish place. He said, but nowadays the place where the Jews live is Israel. There's around 6 million of us here. So many Jews living in Israel. And he said, and I personally, I want to be living where the Jews are. I want to be part of it. And I think that, I think it's like, just with Tisha B'Av coming up, we all know that the reason why the second temple was destroyed was because of Sinat Chinam, because of baseless hatred. And I think this is part of like our tikkun, part of a spiritual fixing for the Jewish people. It's that like how important it is for us to live together and to be, living not necessarily in Israel, but being connected to the Jewish community, being committed to Jewish communities throughout the world, and having our hearts together with Israel. And I feel like it's not easy. It's not easy. It's much easier to live at Blue Lake and to live in the wilderness and to just break off and just to say, no more. Like the Jewish community is wonderful, but also has problems. I think it'd be easier just to live on my own, just to do my own thing. And like to say, okay, like we're here, we're being a part of it, we're being part of the Jewish people. I remember once I heard a funny story from Rabbi Manis Friedman. It was like a woman wanted to have she was trying to start like a women's prayer group. And so she approached Rabbi Friedman and asked him about how about how do I improve the social dynamics? We have a bit of tension in our women's prayer group. How would you recommend to create a better feeling, a better sort of bonding in the women's prayer book? And Rabbi Friedman said something, and it was a funny response, but I've never forgotten it. He said, well, I know what to tell you about, bonding, and he said, my experience of men's minions is that basically it's a group of 10 men who can barely stand together, who can barely stand each other, but they've got to get together for a minion. Okay, I think he was joking. I think that probably he does basically get along with people in his minion, but it's just like it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how we feel about it. It doesn't really. The importance is just being together. It's just sticking with it and being there, just being part of the Jewish people, in good times and in bad times and in hard times and in difficult times, that we are in the galut, and that's the situation, and and we're here. We're part of the Jewish people. We're here. I was very touched this week that I have a dear friend. I've mentioned her before on the blog, Sarah Debbie Goodfriend, and she's been my chavruta, my email chavruta, for 7 years. And she came with her mother's shul, I think it's the Young Israel of Scarsdale, and they came, a bunch of them, and it was a solidarity mission with Israel. As soon as they heard that they were canceling flights to Israel, that the U.S. was canceling flights to Israel, they decided, okay, we are planning our trip to Israel. And they went to all sorts of places that I would be afraid to go to personally. They went to Sderot and Beersheba and Ashkelon, all these places where rockets are falling, because it was so important to them to show, I am here. We're in the galut, And we're in the galut together. We're going through this together. I also read like a beautiful quote from he's a state representative, state assemblyman in New York. His name is Dov Hikind, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And he also came to Israel. And just he said, everywhere he went, people were asking him, like, Israelis were saying, why are you here? Why are you in Beersheba? Why are you in Sderot? Why are you in Netivot? What are you doing here? Why would any person, basically, the implication, why would any person in his right mind come here now? You know? And so Dev Hikind says, he says, the final line of what he writes, above all, I am grateful to have been able to feel in my soul what my fellow Jews are going through here. Above all, I am grateful to have been able to feel in my soul what my fellow Jews are going through there in Israel, if only briefly. And that's it. You know, like we're in the Galus together. And it doesn't really matter where you live. This wasn't supposed to be a pep talk about moving to Israel or being in Israel. It's just about like we are here together. And I feel like being in the Galus together and caring about it together and, you know, sticking with the Jewish community with all of our mishugas and all of our issues and all of like the complications of being part of the Jewish community, that we are here together. And I feel like just doing that, just being in the Galus together is just one, I think, a big step towards the end of that Galus and really seeing the Geula. So I want to bless all of you Jewish moms. It's almost Tisha B'Av. I want to bless everyone. This will be our last Tisha B'Av. Please, B'ezrat Hashem, the Mashiach should come very, very soon. So I want to bless all of you Jewish moms with an amazing week. Call to